This video is created for informational purposes only. Everyone mentioned is treated with respect, and no harm or disrespect is intended. Viewer discretion is advised. They didn't just work inside the justice system, they shaped it. For nearly a century, one name decided who faced justice. In 5 counties across South Carolina's Lowcountry, there's a stretch of marshland and moss-draped oaks, where one family name appeared on prosecution after prosecution for 87 years straight. 3 generations. 3 men named Randolph Murdaugh. All circuit solicitors, the prosecutors, from 1920 to 2006. Locals had a name for it, Murdaugh Country. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how nearly 9 decades of legal control created something unprecedented in American justice. You'll meet the 3 men who built that empire, and you'll see the first fractures that no reputation could hide. Stay with me. By the end, the myth of invincibility will look very different. This is a story about power in plain sight. How the Murdaugh dynasty rose, ruled, and began to crack. Hampton County, South Carolina, population 15,000. 78 miles west of Charleston, deep in the Lowcountry, where Spanish moss hangs heavy and the Salkehatchie River cuts through bottomland that floods every spring. This is where the Murdaughs built their world. In 1910, a 23-year-old attorney named Randolph Murdaugh Sr. opened a one-man law firm on Hampton's Main Street. He graduated from the University of South Carolina Law School that same year. Naval Academy before that. His father, Josiah, was a Confederate veteran and wealthy businessman. His mother's family traced back to Jefferson Davis. Randolph wasn't just another small-town lawyer. He bought the local newspaper, the Hampton County Herald. He served on the school board. He showed up at every county Democratic convention. And in 1920, when the position of circuit solicitor became an elected office, Randolph Murdaugh Sr. ran. A circuit solicitor in South Carolina is what other states call a district attorney. They prosecute every criminal case in their jurisdiction, every felony, every major crime. The 14th Judicial Circuit covers 5 counties: Allendale, Beaufort, Colleton, Hampton, and Jasper. It's the only circuit in South Carolina that oversees 5 counties, a territory larger than Rhode Island. Randolph Sr. won that 1920 election. He defeated 2 opponents and took office. He held that position for 20 years, until July 19, 1940, when his car was struck by a Charleston and Western Carolina freight train at a grade crossing near Varnville. He was 53 years old. 1 week later, his son announced his campaign for the same office. Randolph Buster Murdaugh Jr. was 25 years old, fresh from USC Law School, and voters elected him by over 6,000 votes. Buster would hold that office for 46 years. If you're doing the math, that's 3 generations back to back, from 1920 to 2006. 87 years of Murdaughs deciding who got prosecuted and who didn't, across 5 South Carolina counties. Before I go further, if this story grabs you, hit subscribe now. This is a 4-part series, and episode 2 drops next week. You won't want to miss what happens at Moselle. During those decades, the Murdaughs didn't just prosecute cases. They built a civil practice that became one of the most successful personal injury firms in the state. The firm, originally founded by Randolph Sr. in 1910, grew into Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elsroth Dietrich, known as PMP'd. They specialized in lawsuits against railroads, trucking companies, corporations, big settlements, 7 figures, 8 figures. By the early 2000s, a South Carolina law made it easy for plaintiffs to file lawsuits in any county where a defendant owned property, even if the accident happened somewhere else. Hampton County judges rarely transferred cases out. The American Tort Reform Association called the 14th Circuit one of the worst judicial hellholes for defendants in the country. PMP'd's offices became known locally as the house that CSX built because of how many times they sued the railroad. So the Murdaughs had both sides of the justice system covered. They prosecuted crimes, and they won civil judgments for nearly a century. If you lived in Murdaugh Country, you knew the name. You probably knew someone who worked for them, went to school with them. sat in a courtroom where they argued. It wasn't sinister, it was simply how things were, until it wasn't. February 24th, 2019, 2:30 in the morning. A boat crashes into the Archers Creek Bridge near Paris Island, South Carolina. 6 people on board, all young, all from prominent Lowcountry families. One of them, 19-year-old Mallory Beach, is thrown into the water. Her body is found a week later. The boat belonged to Alex Murdaugh, Randolph Murdaugh III's son, 4th generation, a partner at PMPED. And at the wheel that night was Alex's younger son, Paul Murdaugh, 19 years old. Investigators said Paul had been drinking. Witnesses said he was drunk. Toxicology later confirmed it. Paul was charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence causing death. For the first time in nearly 100 years, the Murdaugh name wasn't on the prosecutor's side of a case file. It was on the defendant's side. Mallory Beach's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit. They wanted Paul's financial records. They wanted to know about his assets. A hearing was scheduled for June 10, 2021. Paul's attorneys argued he couldn't afford a settlement, but that hearing never happened. If you're thinking what I'm thinking, drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in that courtroom? Let's talk about it. Because 3 days before that hearing, on June 7, 2021, Paul Murdaugh and his mother, Maggie, were found shot to death near the dog kennels at the family's hunting estate. Let me take you back and show you exactly how this dynasty was built. 1910. Randolph Murdaugh Sr. opens his law firm in Hampton. 1920. He wins election as circuit solicitor of the 14th Circuit. He's 33 years old. During his 20 years in office, Randolph Sr. prosecuted corrupt county auditors, sheriffs accused of embezzlement. He represented governors. He prosecuted governors. His murder trials filled courtroom galleries. When he died in that train collision in 1940, his funeral shut down Hampton County. His son, Randolph Buster Murdaugh Jr., took over immediately. Buster was known for his courtroom theatrics. He'd act out murders in front of juries, chew tobacco on the witness stand. Professors at Cornell Law School later noted that the South Carolina Supreme Court rebuked him multiple times for improper closing arguments, including one rape case where he told jurors that if they acquitted the defendant, he'd drop charges against other accused rapists. In 1956, a federal grand jury indicted Buster on charges of conspiring with bootleggers. A witness testified that Buster warned a bootlegger to move his moonshine still into a neighboring county to avoid police. Buster resigned temporarily. The case went to trial. Out of 23 defendants, only 5 were acquitted. Buster was one of them. But the presiding federal judge, Walter E. Hoffman, didn't mince words. He publicly stated that Buster was grossly unethical and that if he were in Buster's position, he could not go back and face his people, much less resume public office. Buster ignored him. 2 months later, voters re-elected him. He served another 30 years until 1986. His son, Randolph Murdaugh III, took over that same year. Randolph III ran unopposed in every single election. He held the office until 2005. In 2019, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster awarded him the Order of the Palmetto, the state's highest civilian honor. Randolph III had 4 children. 3 sons, Randolph IV, John Marvin, and Richard Alexander, called Alex. Alex graduated from USC Law School in 1994. He joined PMPED. He also volunteered part-time in the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office. He married Margaret Maggie Branstetter in 1993. They had 2 sons, Richard Alexander Jr., called Buster, and Paul Terry Murdaugh. By the 2000s, Alex Murdaugh was a fixture, president of the South Carolina Trial Lawyers Association, partner at one of the state's most powerful firms, volunteer prosecutor. The Murdaugh name still meant something, but behind that name, something else was happening. If this is blowing your mind, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Seriously, this story doesn't end here. Let's talk about what Murdaugh Country actually meant. Columnist Kathleen Parker once wrote that the justice system in the 14th Circuit was regarded as rigged. Local attorneys would rather settle than go to trial there. It wasn't a secret. It was the culture. When you have 3 generations of one family controlling prosecutions for 87 years, when that same family runs the most successful personal injury firm in the region, when they're in every courthouse, every bar association meeting, every political fundraiser, lines blur. Who do you call when the prosecutor's son is your opposing counsel? Who investigates when the solicitor's family owns the biggest plaintiff firm in 5 counties? Those questions didn't get asked out loud, not until 2019, not until Mallory Beach died, and not until June 7, 2021. Alex Murdaugh's role as a volunteer prosecutor is confirmed by the solicitor's office. They could only cite one case where he served as lead counsel, a 2019 guilty plea for failure to stop for police in Colleton County. One case. But he had a badge, he had access, he had the name. And on February 25, 2019, the day after the boat crash that killed Mallory Beach, 14th Circuit Solicitor Duffy Stone recused himself from the case. He sent a letter to South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson asking him to take over. Why? Because Alex Murdaugh, the defendant Paul Murdaugh's father, was a volunteer in Stone's office. Stone was appointed solicitor in 2006 by Governor Mark Sanford. He was the first non-Murdaugh to hold the office in 87 years. But even he couldn't escape the family's shadow. For almost 100 years, the law had a family name. But in June 2021, that name would be spoken at a crime scene. If you want the full document list, the mapped timeline, every source we used, subscribe. Everything's linked in the description. Episode 2 drops next week, and you need to see what happens next. June 7th, 2021. Colleton County, South Carolina. The Murdaugh family's hunting estate, called Moselle, sits on 1,700 acres near Islandton. The property includes a main house, a guest cabin, dog kennels, and stretches of swamp and forest. Alex and Maggie Murdaugh purchased the property around 2012. That evening, Maggie drove to Moselle from the family's beach house in Edisto, about an hour away. Alex had asked her to meet him there. She arrived sometime between 7 and 7:30. Their son Paul had been at his uncle's equipment rental shop that day. He ate dinner with his uncle's family in Okati, then left for Moselle around 6. At 8:44 p.m., Paul recorded a video on his phone near the dog kennels. The video shows a chocolate lab. In the background you can hear voices. Prosecutors would later say those voices belonged to Paul, Maggie, and Alex. At 10:07 p.m., Alex Murdaugh called 911. He reported that his wife and son had been shot. When Colleton County Sheriff Sergeant Daniel Green arrived, Alex was waiting near the kennels. The first thing Alex told him, "I have a loaded gun on the scene." Within a minute, Alex started talking about the 2019 boat crash. "This is a long story," Alex said. "He's been getting threats. I know that's what it is." Maggie Murdaugh, 52 years old, was found near a single doghouse. She'd been shot multiple times with a rifle. Paul Murdaugh, 22 years old, was found near a row of kennels. He'd been shot with a shotgun. Alex told investigators he'd been visiting his mother in Almeda. He said he returned to Moselle and found them dead. He said he was never at the kennels that night. 3 days later, on June 10th, 2021, Randolph Murdaugh III, Alex's father, the third-generation solicitor, died peacefully at his home. He was 81 years old. The murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh made national news within hours. Not just because of the brutality, not just because of the boat crash connection, but because of the name. For the first time, people outside South Carolina were asking, who are the Murdaughs? And what they found was a century of power, a dynasty that controlled prosecutions across 5 counties, a family law firm that won millions, and a web of cases, old and new, that all seemed to intersect. In June 2021, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division reopened the investigation into the 2015 death of 19-year-old Stephen Smith, whose body had been found on a road in Hampton County. The case had been ruled a hit and run, but there were questions, and the Murdaugh name kept coming up. SLED also opened a criminal investigation into the 2018 death of Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh's housekeeper, who died after a reported fall at the family's home. Alex Murdaugh had allegedly helped her family file a wrongful death lawsuit, then kept the settlement money for himself. By September 2021, Alex Murdaugh had resigned from PMPED. The firm said he'd been stealing money. On September 4, 2021, Alex called 911 again. This time, he said someone shot him on the side of a road in Hampton County. He was treated for a superficial gunshot wound to the head. 2 weeks later, police arrested Curtis Edward Smith, Alex's distant cousin and alleged drug dealer, and charged him with assisting Alex in a staged suicide plot. Alex wanted his surviving son, Buster, to collect a $10 million life insurance payout. In July 2022, Alex Murdaugh was indicted on 2 counts of murder. He pleaded not guilty. On March 2, 2023, after a 6-week trial, a jury convicted Alex Murdaugh of murdering his wife Maggie and his son Paul. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. Judge Clifton Newman sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In November 2023, Alex pleaded guilty to 22 state financial crime charges. He was sentenced to 27 additional years in prison. In April 2024, he was sentenced in federal court to 40 more years for fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. Prosecutors said he stole nearly $12 million from clients and his law firm over more than a decade. Alex Murdaugh is currently incarcerated at a South Carolina state prison. His legal team has filed for a new trial alleging jury tampering. That motion was denied in January 2024. Appeals are ongoing. For 100 years, the name Murdaugh meant power. In our next episode, it will mean proof. Subscribe so you don't miss episode 2, The Murdaugh Murders, What Really Happened to Maggie and Paul. We're going minute by minute through June 7th, 2021. The timeline, the evidence, the phone video that changed everything. Check the description for every source we used, every court document, every timeline. And next time, a kennel, a phone, and a voice that shattered an alibi.